but I think we have to face some sort of happy medium, and I really do want the bridge saved if at all possible, but I also don't have a solution as to where we would find the money unless there's anyone that happens to have $1 million lying around and would be so kind as to donate it to us. I think we would say yes. And so that's kind of my take on the bridge.
Okay. Jason, you want to go next?
Sure. I consider myself to be a history buff. I love history. I think this building that we're in is really a neat, nifty building. They don't build them like this anymore. And we need to appreciate things like that because so much of what's constructed today is disposable. It's built for having a period of time and then it's torn down and you replace it with something newer and better. But I'm also a realist, and the realist in me recognizes that sometimes it's not effective to try to rehabilitate something. PennDOT is looking at this bridge. PennDOT has professional engineers. I'm certainly not qualified or competent to overrule their professional engineering judgment. If they deem this bridge to be deficient or unable to be repaired for some reason, then I pretty much have to defer to them. They have a process. Their process takes into consideration the historical aspects of the structure, whether it's a bridge or whatever it is that they're working on. They consult with the PHMC for an independent review. That's a historical group that looks at structures like this to see what the significance is. But I think what's really paramount here, and is being overlooked by some, are the safety considerations. The problems with this bridge, as we know, is because it was Portland cement. Portland cement doesn't react very well with water. And this bridge had been repaired time and time again with Portland cement, which has led to its condition. When I talk about safety, you may recall not that long ago, when we had some really bad flooding, there were a number of people that were stranded at the Meadows banquet hall because this water had come up and over the banks and they needed to be rescued. I think it's wrong for the township to direct the county, which owns the bridge, what to do with the bridge. And it's certainly wrong of the township to suggest that that bridge should be owned by the township. You may not know, but the county offered to sell the bridge to the township for $1. We're not in the business of owning bridges. When we own bridges, it's expensive to maintain them. You take on all the safety and liability risks that go with the bridge. So if PennDOT determines that the bridge needs to go, I'll be disappointed, but at the same time I'll recognize that it's probably for the better of the common good. And I would hope that if the bridge does need to be replaced, that PennDOT would do its best to architecturally design and implement a bridge that's very consistent with the bridge that we have. I think that it can be replicated to a certain extent, and I think they can also take some of the components of the bridge, some of the stone that's on the facade, and rather than using a brick veneer, which will deteriorate over time, actually use the stone from this bridge as part of a new structure if we have to get to that point. And I would also hope that as part of this process that we would look to integrate some signage on the trail path so that that signage would direct individuals to the bridge. I mean, a lot of people right now aren't thinking about the bridge because that road is closed. A sign on the trail paths, like some of the other markers along the way that point out environmental areas or historical areas, I think would be important to remind people of the significance of the bridge so that we don't forget about what was there if in fact it does have to go.
Thanks. George?
History is very important. My wife will tell you it drives her nuts when we go places because I'm always looking at the old stuff and paying attention and reading what's going on. I think the Meadows Road Bridge is a beautiful example. I think it's very important to the history of the township. I think it would be great if it was saved. The Holland Farmstead right there was just recently added on to the National Register of Historic Places, and it would be great if the bridge was as well. But like Jason said, I also understand the modern day issues that bridge has. Coming from an emergency services background, I would love to see a brand new bridge right next to that one. That should there ever be an emergency there, such as the flooding at the Meadows Banquet Hall, that fire trucks would be able to access it from that side much quicker than having to go up and around. And it's not just fire trucks, ambulance, police officers, anybody that needs to get over there onto that side now has to go all the way around. A modern bridge would be super right next to it. If we could rehab that bridge enough for foot traffic and bicycle traffic, I think that would be great. There has been talk of a pathway to go from the Saucon Valley School District campus down through Hellertown and to the rail trail to connect it all together, possibly utilizing the Meadows Road Bridge. I also understand the county not wanting to necessarily rehab the bridge and replace it. I understand the cost associated with it, and it's not just the cost to rehab it right now, it's the cost next year, and the year after, and the year after. Eventually, the amount of money you're spending to rehab the bridge would far exceed the cost of a new bridge. We have a new bridge right there on Water Street. Amazingly enough, they built it in 2.5 months, pretty incredible. It would be awesome to have a new bridge there. I also love the history of it. So I'm torn. I understand both sides of it. I understand the history side, but I also understand the county side that they would much rather have a new bridge. So if we can save it and do both, I think that would be great. I honestly don't foresee that as an option, but at this point, we're gonna have to leave that up to the county. So.
Okay, thanks. I will now read Sandra Yoder's answer to the question about the Meadows Road Bridge. She said, at this point in time, we are waiting for a copy of the PennDOT report that was sent to Northampton County that defines the issues with regard to the Saucon Creek and its current and future potential impacts on the bridge. Once we receive the full study and have it reviewed by the township's engineer and legal counsel, I will feel confident that I can then make a fully informed final decision on the future of the bridge, with the safety of our residents being the highest priority. So the third question is, what do you think about the Route 378 corridor and the number of businesses that are vacant on or near it? How do you think it can be revitalized? And do you think the township needs to have a hand in making it a more attractive place, both aesthetically and to potential businesses? And I think it's Kristen's turn to go first.
Okay. Again, this is a good question for this forum, because if anyone lives over there, my husband and I said live on Black River, or Bucknell Circle, which is off Black River Road, and we travel the 378 corridor all the time. And I have always been mystified as to why certain businesses can't stay in that one shopping center over by Taps. If you're familiar with that area where Revolutions is now, that's again empty. Having businesses there would be excellent. I, as part of council, if on council, having an impact on what private business owners can do is you have a limit, like you can't tell them what to do. They own that property. And so I would hope that council could advise some of the businesses that own property that is now vacant and work with them to try to get businesses in. And the whole point of doing that would be to bring in revenue outside of taxes from residents here. We've actually had a proposal in front of council that I've seen from going to meetings that has 2 office buildings for a landlocked portion kind of right across from that shopping center, but the entrance would be on the pike, just because PennDOT was not willing to, or did not think it would be safe, and agreeably that makes sense because you come right around the curve there, if you're familiar with that, to have an entrance and exit right there on 378. And I know that just went through zoning and hearing, it was just approved. I don't know when that will come to fruition, but it's a step in the right direction. And that's the kind of direction I would want to see continue, being able to be on the team, in so many words, and ask business owners that when they are trying to develop in our township, if they're able to contain water flow. That's a huge issue. That's come up at tons of meetings. Like anytime there's talk about a development, what about the runoff? Where's the water gonna go? Because we have sinkholes. Like if anyone's looked around, there are sinkholes that happen if water's not properly diverted and continues to flow away from your property. Logistically, I do think that we are there's only so much room we have to develop along 378, because if you kind of head up, I don't know, talking about geography, please don't see, don't loop, come with me. If you go across and you head up towards Center Valley Parkway, you know, it's a pretty narrow strip there between 378 and 78. So there's not a ton that can go on the one side. Now, and then on the other side, we do kind of have a lot, there's things there. I don't know if there's any parcels that are up for development. But then kind of going the other way, more towards the tavern, Yanni's Tavern and Cider Lake. You know, there's a couple areas maybe where whoever owns those properties could be interested in developing them at some point. But I just feel that the council is limited as to what we can tell landowners to what to do with their property, other than to encourage them and put the word out that we want businesses here.
Thank you. George, you want to go next?
Sure. We need a Sheetz or a Wawa, how about it? The 378 corridor is tough. Those of you that were around before I-78, the Speedway gas station that's down there now, used to be on the other side of the street. When they put 78 in, they actually moved it across 378 and put it on the other side. We look at places like Revolutions, Revolutions and even before, when that was operational as just a restaurant and a bowling alley, was great. It brought people to the township, it brought people into this area. And without them there, it's hard to find a draw for that area. You have taps, you have the gym, there's a couple other small shops in there. Same thing right down the street. You have a couple shops down there. You have the Speedway gas station, the veterinary office, a couple little restaurants. But the reality of it, when you look at a place like Revolutions, for a business to come in there, at a $46,000 a month rental for Revolutions, that's a big pill to swallow for somebody that's trying to open a business. And I understand it, that's tough. I understand the property owner needs that money to cover their costs. It's for sale, it's over $5 million. If anybody has an extra $5 million laying around, we'd love to have you come on in and open something up. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot the township can do to draw businesses in. It would be great to have more businesses there, but without the other places there to draw them in, and without customers there to keep them in business, it's tough, and I understand that. I wish Lower Saucon had a larger commercial tax base. I wish there was land that we could develop, but there just isn't. Lower Saucon is a great residential community. That's what we're known for. People are coming here in droves. They're coming here from New Jersey, they're coming here from New York. Is that 78's fault? Maybe, but it's great to have new people in the township. I'm sorry. I welcome them with open arms. Come on in. There's no reason they can't live here and enjoy this community that some of us have enjoyed for 20 or 30 years. We love it here. We like to keep it rural. If we can open more businesses along that corridor where it's already a commercial base, that's great. So.
Okay, thank you. And then Jason.
Thanks, Josh. I disagree that there's not much that we can do. You may not be aware, but a few years ago, there was an economic development task force that was created by Dave Willard in conjunction with some local business leaders. And they prepared a formal report. This report was done in 2014 to try to identify other areas for economic development. And if anybody wants a copy of it, I can share my copy. You can get this at the township office. The report has some great ideas. The problem is that we haven't pursued them. We haven't tried to implement them. And that's really part of the problem here. Section B of the report is directed solely to Route 378. In talking with local developers, the biggest complaint that I've heard is the township itself. The township has a reputation for being opposed to development, opposed to improvements, and staying the way it was, just for the sake of being oppositional. And I think that that's a problem. I think we need to change that reputation that the township has so that individuals and developers want to come here and improve areas like the 378 corridor. The ideas that I have, I actually think there are 6 things that we can do to improve the 378 corridor. The first thing I would do is I would create a committee of local governmental officials and local business leaders, and also the property owners along 378. both the local property owners and those that are not local. There's a difference here, and that's significant. The local ones, I think, have historically wanted to work with the township toward a common good. The non-local ones may view some of the properties like the shopping center where Revolutions is as simply an asset, whether it generates revenue or not, regardless of the consequences of the community. So I'd like to communicate with all those stakeholders and find out what it is that we can do collectively to try to move the 378 corridor forward. I would also work with the Lehigh Valley Chamber of Commerce, the Lehigh Valley Economic Development Corporation, and the Northampton County Economic Development Corporation. And there's other economic organizations that can help us, but they have their ears to the ground. They know what is needed, and they can help to steer appropriate businesses to us. It'll help us, it'll help the Lehigh Valley as a whole, and that's what their role is. I would also work very hard on council to try to steer development to that area, knowing that that's really an important area for the township. We only have 2 areas that are zoned for commercial, really. We have the 412 corridor, which doesn't have a lot. We have the 378 corridor. So if our hope of getting off the dole of the landfill is to have economic development, we need to look to the 378 corridor. We need to do it well, and we need to do it soon. Another thing I would do is I would contact PennDOT, and I would get involved with PennDOT as to what sort of infrastructure improvements we can provide on the 378 corridor. The 378 corridor right now is sort of a mishmash of different types of commercial properties. You have retail, you have business, you have office space, you have services, you have some residential. I think we need to try to improve that corridor to provide better access and better visibility to the businesses, and also while maintaining it as a safe corridor for additional traffic that may be going through there. I would also look to consider rezoning and conditional uses. Being on the zoning hearing board, I know about that very well. There's certain parts of the 378 corridor that can be used in a way that's consistent with the neighboring properties, but may not be necessarily permitted under the zoning ordinance. So I think that we need to look at our own internal regulations that may be an impediment to development in those areas. And the other thing I would do lastly was I would make sure that we assure retention of the businesses that we have. We have a lot of really good businesses there that have been there for a very long time and contribute to the community in a number of ways, by providing services, by providing jobs, by providing taxes. And I think it's important that we don't lose those businesses. It's a lot easier to keep a business that you have than it is to go out and find a new business. So if we can retain those businesses by getting out of the way and making things better for them to do what they do, I think that will help us. As an example, on Monday, we had our zoning hearing board meeting. And as Kristen had alluded to earlier, we had approved some variances that came in for the development of a property across from Revolutions. It was a landlocked property that will provide access into these businesses off of Philadelphia Pike. And the reason why the access had to go in off of Philadelphia Pike is because of the slope at 378. When 378 was built, it was built up, and there were some other issues in there that required that. The development is going to be 2 very small office buildings. This isn't going to have any sort of noise impact. This isn't going to be an operation that's going on. It's not a bar that's going to be open at 2 o'clock in the morning. The neighbors are going to be complaining. It's going to be a business that will be primarily during normal business hours, 9 to 5 or something like that. So I'm happy that we were able to advance a project like that, because it makes sense for the use of the property, which was otherwise blighted. It had garbage and junk, and it was literally a junkyard. There's pieces of metal leaching into the ground and contaminating the soil. So by improving properties like that, and by being proactive, I think we can do a lot of things to improve 378 to develop that corridor.
Thank you. Christoph.
Yes, Dave Bullard did an excellent job trying to get that task force going, and then when he wasn't reelected, it kind of fell to the wayside. There was a report, like Jason said, and I think a lot of people that were there wanted us to reduce our regulations, especially in the stormwater area. And council really didn't want to do that. Council did support that development you just talked about. What's his name?
John Blair.
John Blair. We sent that off without any, the only comment I think we had, that was the one on the stormwater, correct?
Yes.
And, we recognize the fact that that stream going through there, whatever waterway, needed attention and whatever. And he's a very reputable developer, so, I think it's gonna be a great asset to this township. Over the years, and I'm glad you brought up the past, because I feel like I was bringing up too much of the past, but I can't help that because I've been there. Over the years, we used to contribute $10,000 or $20,000, forgive me, to LV, Lehigh Valley Economic Development Corps, whatever, I always get the initials screwed up. But anyway, that was in charge of economic development in the Lehigh Valley, and we paid to be able to be part of that, so that if there was a company that wanted to locate a business, we'd be here we are. But for years, nothing. And finally we said, we're wasting our money. Well, why are we paying when we're not getting any results? So we stopped paying them. So then Northampton County over the years had an economic development department, and we were working with them, and then different executives changed, and things fall through the wayside, and then at one time the township did have staffing for economic development, and it just wasn't enough to justify a full-time person. So we have tried different things to retain a business. I can't imagine how a township would do that. We welcome all businesses. We're active with the Chamber of Commerce. We support our businesses with ribbon cutting. We try to promote their events, and we're very grateful to the community spirit that these businesses, with Community Day, with our what was that thing called, the National Night Out, and all the donations we get from our local businesses. We're a community, we belong to each other. What I don't like is that at those task force meetings, because I did attend a lot of them, the developers would say that, oh, we have to go to Lower Saucon, they're so strict, and that costs us so much money, and they'd be on and on and on. And we have these review letters, and I said, you know what, you see this book? It's called the zoning regulations. When you go to apply for your application to develop whatever you want to do, this is the book that Lower Saucon says you have to meet, okay? And when you receive review letters from our consultants that say, this reg was not met, this reg was not met, this reg was not met, who's not doing their job? They picked the wrong engineering firm. And now that engineering firm says, oh, well, okay, I guess we have to do that. So now they have to go back and they have to meet that reg, meet that reg, meet that reg. Now here's your other bill. Now who's costing who money? The township isn't. The township staff's doing a great job in reviewing applications, making sure that our regs are met, the ones that we approve for this township to be a good township, so people can want to live here because it's beautiful. So, I don't get any answers from the developers about why they didn't meet the regs then, and why it's costing them money. Sorry, but, I want to see businesses here. I'm wear a hat with, I'm one of the liaisons with the chamber, but how do you get them to stay here? Revolutions is a loss. That is definitely a loss. Did I use it? I don't bowl. But I think that when we go outside our community to go someplace, we're hurting our local businesses. And I think we have to stay here more and go out to dinner more in places here and stuff. But I don't know what that answer is. All I know is that as a township official, that the township tries to keep businesses here. We don't have a list, just try to keep them here. I don't know.
Thank you. And this is Sandra Yerger's answer to the question about the Route 378 corridor. She says, retail businesses, both small and large, are failing throughout the region. One way this is being successfully addressed by some municipalities is by encouraging the establishment of small light industry and manufacturers along corridors like Route 378. This approach provides jobs, revitalizes the area, and actually can make the area more attractive with new landscaping and building design. I would be interested in contacting these communities to see how they accomplish this positive result without impacting the residential communities that are in close proximity to this type of development. And for the final question, again, this is a more general question of all the candidates. If elected, in coming to a decision on something, how will you balance your views with those of your constituents in a case where they are in conflict with each other? And I think we've all gone first at this point. So, George, you want to go first?
Sure.
In the invitation?
After being appointed to council last year and being able to sit up there, I've sat in the audience many times before that as president of the fire company and also as a resident. But after sitting up there on council, it's interesting sometimes when people come up to that microphone and you think you have a handle on things and know what they're going to say, and sometimes they'll come up there and they'll blast you left and right. And that's part of being a public servant. Ultimately we are there to serve the community. We don't necessarily always agree with the residents. We don't necessarily always agree with each other sitting up there on council. There's times when, we'll be sitting right next to each other and, yeah, I think that's good. No, I don't think that is good. But that's why there's 5 of us up there. That's why there's 5 people up there that are elected by the residents of the township to assist them in making the best decision for the township and its residents. So the great thing about a public meeting is anybody can come there. Anybody can come up to that podium and they can say, this is how I feel about this, this is how I feel about that. And that makes a big difference. We've had people send in letters of complaint that, oh, we don't like this. One thing I'll use as an example was e-bikes on the rail trail. And we got multiple letters about e-bikes on the rail trail, how they're bad, this and that. But when it came time for the public meeting, not one resident showed up to voice their complaints. That says a lot to me. If you're, a keyboard person that wants to sit behind the keyboard and complain all the time, I'm sorry. I'm not like that. I'm gonna come out, I'm gonna tell you exactly how I feel. Some people like that, some people don't. I'm sorry. I'm not up there to please you, or please you, or please you. I'm up there to help everybody in the township. That's why we're all up there, to do the best we can for the residents of the township.
Thanks. Kristen?
Again, this is a good question, and it feels a little bit like a job interview. Like, how would you handle your worst moment? But I guess the biggest thing that I feel like I want to say is just like when working with anyone and communicating with anybody, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And so whether that's to you if you come to a meeting, whether that's to a fellow council member that is having a reaction to something that someone may have said at the podium, or just something that's before council, my approach would always just be to listen and then ask as many questions as possible to widen my spotlight of information to make a good decision that will benefit the most people in that situation. I think trying to stay level-headed and just remember that the other person that you're talking to is there for a reason and is probably super passionate about what they're trying to do or accomplish is huge. And once you kind of can be empathetic to anyone, you are able to talk to them for real. At least that's what I think, and that's what I believe, and that's what I try to practice, whether I'll be on council or just having a fight with Brian. So, so I think that's just sort of my general approach, and that's the approach that I would bring if I receive your vote on Tuesday, November 5th.
Thank you. Priscilla?
Okay, I think what's hard sometimes is that we can't be all things to all people. A lot of people think because we're a township, we're supposed to be able to fix everything. And sometimes there's private matters with neighbor to neighbor that it's out of our realm, that they have to hire their own attorney And they always say hire counsel, and everybody gets confused because we're counsel, but it's spelled differently. I'm just gonna read something. This has been in my bio, and I will be posting my bio on my Facebook page soon. But you can always count on me to stay on top of all the issues and to continue to ask the tough questions. And I try to demand a more responsive government. And I always try to be very fair, like I was telling you before. I know what it's like because I sat in that audience. Another lady the other night at our council meeting was like, she was so nervous, she didn't know, calm down, relax, I know how you feel. I sat there, I was a nervous wreck sitting on the edge of my chair, not knowing, so I try to help people and I listen and try to respect their rights when I'm making decisions. And try to balance those with the neighborhood and the entire community. What does everybody want, and what's this gonna mean in the end? And then we have to enact laws and policies that protect those rights. You know me, I'm not a rubber stamp, would never do that. I always ask questions, and I feel that it's preserving our sense of place is very important. It's also, I encourage people to get involved and try to let us know what they want, Facebook is a great tool, but yet they need to come to a meeting. They really do. I just got it in the mail today from a resident complaining to me about the e-bikes. Former councilwoman they addressed it to. So they're very upset that we passed the e-bikes, and I keep asking the chief, do we have any problems with the e-bikes on the rail trail? No, none. So I don't know what their issue was, but that was one of the things that I felt bad about, but what are you gonna do? So I try to represent all the people, and I encourage them, and people call me and thank me for their help usually, and I guess that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Casey?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Well, Josh, I think you saved the easiest question for last. I think the important way to look at this is to understand what the disagreement may be between my views and the constituents' views. Without having an understanding of what their concerns are, I cannot make an informed decision in the best interest of the township. And I appreciate when people come forward at the zoning meetings to express whatever concerns they have, so that I have that perspective, because a lot of times I don't know the situation, I don't know the dynamics of what's going on. So I would hope that by communicating with people that you can find some common ground. You'll never find complete common ground, but hopefully you can find some common ground. And where there's still a conflict that exists, my view would be to always act in the best interest of the township, both now and in the future. I'm not here for personal gain, I'm not here for partisan politics, I'm not here for political expedience, I'm not here to benefit any family or friends, I'm here to serve the township, and that's what my role is. So I would always defer back to that rule. If it's in the best interest of the township, then that's how I would decide. And sometimes people may not agree with that, but I would have to use my judgment to make that decision and to proceed forward with it. Before I give up the microphone, I want to make one comment about something that Priscilla had said earlier, and I completely agree with her. She had mentioned the opioid crisis. It's here. And for anyone who doesn't think that it's here, they're naive or they're just not paying attention. And I say that because just last week there were two young gentlemen. They were sons and they were also fathers to young children, and both of them overdosed. It's tragic. And one of the things that if I get elected to council is to focus on that, because I don't think that we're paying enough attention to it. I went to a Saucon Valley Partnership meeting, was it 2 weeks ago, Priscilla?
The second Wednesday,
Yeah.
whatever that was.
And for those who aren't familiar, the partnership is an organization between Lower Saucon Township, Borough of Hellertown, the school district, to talk about common issues that are facing all of them so they can work in conjunction. The opioid issue was never discussed during that meeting, and I think it needs to be, because it affects the nation, it affects our state, and it's affecting our communities. And unless we keep our eye on that, it's going to become a bigger problem for us. With that said, I would ask for everyone's votes on the 2-year and the 4-year term. I'm the only candidate for the 2-year term, the 4-year term, and I'll yield the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you. And then this is Sandra Yerger's answer to the final question. She wrote, while my decisions are based solely on what I believe to be in the best interest of all Lower Saucon Township residents, for not only the present, but for the future of the township, I will always listen to constituents' concerns and try to arrive at a decision that will be beneficial to all. And at this point, we have a little bit of time remaining. We have about 15 minutes, and I wanted to open up the floor to questions from audience members. If anybody has a question, just raise your hand and I'll come over to you with the microphone. And I would just ask that the question be for all the candidates. Anybody? And can you state your name, please?
Daniel Pearson. My question is, you talked about the landfill. We all know it's closing. We heard things you're gonna do, but we don't hear no specific items we're gonna do. I don't want my taxes going up in 4 years. What do you think about it? What are you guys gonna do?
Daniel, you may not have heard my answers earlier. I mean, we need to focus on economic development elsewhere, and we've done a poor job in that. And we need to really focus upon developing the 378 corridor. So, other than that, there's not much that we can do, because we're landlocked in terms of our space. We have limitations in terms of our zoning. So we need to take the resources that we have and try to maximize those to offset that issue. I share the same concern. That's why I'm running, because I don't want my taxes going up. And I'm hoping that if we have the foresight and the energy to move forward and develop some areas, that we can help to alleviate that burden, because we're taxed to the gills now, and I get it, and I don't want to pay any more taxes. The only thing that continues to go up are taxes, and I'm tired of it, and I think we need to do a better job in addressing those issues before they become too much of a problem for us. And I appreciate coming out and bringing that to our attention again, because I understand how important it is.
Thank you.
It's real easy to sit up here and criticize current administration and council and whatever, because you're really not there every meeting, and the Saucon Valley Partnership did have the opioid crisis on our agenda a year or so ago, and that's why the township had the forum. So we can't keep it on, and for the multi-municipal comprehensive plan, it's really not the place for it. And the police department, like I said, has this program, and they really have a good handle on helping people that are in, I don't want to call them addicts, but the people that are doing these things that need help, and their families, and they're trying. I hear you. I do not want my taxes going up either, and I can try to say what Kathy, our director of finance, said last night at our meeting, but we're putting away money, and we did this several years ago. This wasn't just a thought last night. This has been thought of, because when they got their expansion, we knew in 5 or 6 years that that they were going to be filled, and there's no place else to go. So we started planning, and that's when we asked Kathy to